Good morning.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Susan.
We had a little fun with that. Good morning, everybody, to breakfast Bible study at
Morning,
Bill's.
Tina.
Good morning.
Go in 5 minutes, but every 5 minutes is another 5 minutes.
Whoops, that's my 5 minutes. Sorry. I'll catch you on the recording.
So, for this coming Sunday, which is I'm really sad it's going to be our last outdoor service at the camp. And
Everybody
I don't know
has
about
said
you,
how they
but
enjoyed it.
I have been enjoying this so much that I'm thinking I am booking Sundays for next year,
I
like
would.
now.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Because seriously, I'm loving this.
Mhm.
Being outside is I'm
Yeah.
used to having it like me, once or twice a year. I've done it in the past, but I really look forward to being outdoors on Sundays. This is great.
I know Bob and Betty Peterson like it too.
Yeah.
Everybody that's come.
And I really like the bring your own too. I think that's great.
Yeah. And then you just ask us, please lift.
Well, I think it's
do.
more participatory because when I went to I did my internship at the Crossing Boston, which was an emergent church, and I remember
She's
one of
fine.
the priests who said to me, "How is what you're?" He advised me not to do it there because he said, "How is that going to transfer for you into your New England context, with the little white churches and whatnot?" And I mean, he was seriously concerned for me.
Yeah.
And I said, I have a really good feeling about this. This is going to be transferable no matter where I go. There's things that I think is really good to learn. And it was with Rev Steph Spellers. I mean, come on, I did learn from the best.
Mhm.
So anyway, when we used to do Eucharist, we all gathered in a circle
Okay.
in the sanctuary area, the upper altar area, and the table was in the middle, and it was unscripted, which was great. It was all the words of the institution, but she already had it internalized, We all reached out our hands to participate during the consecration. She had her hands, obviously, but and the table was set up like we do it now for outdoor service. Everything was on the table, all set up already. That was one of my jobs. And I got to set her stole out. That was another little job. We all wrote our own prayers to the people. It was highly participatory. So when I look out and I see everybody with their bread and their wine, I'm like, oh, every time, So there's my little public service announcement.
Well, it feels good also on my end.
On your end, yeah,
Same.
right?
Yeah, my oyster crackers can't be improved on for they don't need to be broken.
My recommendation, if you don't have oyster crackers, is the mini naans. They sell little
yeah.
mini naans, and the only problem is it's like 4 times the size of a regular piece of bread that you'd eat for communion. So they're sort of nibbling.
Well, all you gotta do is really take one little nibble and then save the rest and give it to the birds. So
Oh, no. We have to consume it right after the service, don't we?
as soon as
The mini
service
naan
is
tastes
done,
quite good. I'm not
just
giving it to the
wander off
birds.
into the woods and give your offering to the birds.
Oh,
St.
you're
Francis would
generous.
totally support that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The
he
first
would.
time Brendan said, "Is that cranberry juice?" And I said, "No, cherry juice." Oh,
Oh.
And Jesus never said it had to be wine. It was fruit of the vine.
yeah, and you said fruit
I mean,
juice
hey,
or wine. I can't open a
raspberries
whole
are a
bottle of wine.
vine.
It would turn to vinegar before I finish it.
So, anyhow, we are going to launch right in because I didn't bring any insert or anything, but we are going to launch right into. This is not one of my favorite gospels.
Oh,
Uh-oh.
that's why it's good to talk about.
Ugh,
Matthew
yes. So I
It's
hope you all got
1
some
through
good wisdom for me.
14.
Matthew 22. 1 through 14, and I just have to say, when you get to the part, whoever reads this, whoever volunteers to read this, when you get to the part about friend, how did you get in here without a wedding robe? You
Mhm.
gotta say it like Snidely Whiplash or something, You gotta go, friend, how did you get in here? Because that's exactly the tone I'm hearing, okay?
That's fun.
Matthew 22, 1 through 14. What happened to Tina?
Tina had to go. The 5 minutes
That 5
came and
minutes
went.
finally
Oh, is
ended.
that what happened? I didn't
Yeah.
understand it. Oh, bummer. Where's she going off to already? Tina?
She's going to watch it on replay.
Oh. All right. Here we go. Matthew. Come on, Matthew. I haven't picked up this Bible. This Bible is from my grandfather's death in 1993. Matthew gets more intense, I think, as he goes along.
Parable of the marriage feast.
The marriage feast, yeah. This is kind of like right up there with when we were talking about if you don't forgive someone from your heart, then I'm not going to forgive you, and it's pretty intense. That this is similarly intense. All right, so volunteer to read the passage.
Sure.
Sure.
I'm looking ready, Kathy. I don't know why.
Would you like the new version or the St. James version today?
Let's go with
King James,
let's-
not Saint
I'm sorry.
James.
I'm sorry. I meant to
whichever
say-
one you want. Whichever one you want.
meant to say King James.
We knew what you meant. It's like when I say the trees are falling down, I meant the leaves.
See, friends understand me. Even if I make a mistake, they understand me.
We do.
Okay. And Jesus answered and spake unto them again by parables, and said, The kingdom of heaven is like unto a certain king, which made a marriage for his son, and sent forth his servants to call them that were bidden to the wedding, and they would not come. Again he sent forth other servants, saying, Tell them which are bidden, Behold, I have prepared my dinner, my oxen and my fatlings are killed, and all things are ready. Come unto the marriage. But they made light of it and went their ways, one to his farm, another to his merchandise. And the remnant took his servants and entreated them spitefully and slew them. But when the king heard thereof, he was wroth, and he sent forth his armies and destroyed those murderers and burned up their city. Then saith he to his servants, The wedding is ready, but they which were bidden were not worthy. Go ye therefore into the highways, and as many as ye shall find, bid to the marriage. So those servants went out into the highways and gathered together all as many as they found, both bad and good, and the wedding was furnished with guests. And when the king came in to see the guests, he saw there a man which had not on a wedding garment. And he saith unto him, Friend, how camest thou in hither, not having a wedding garment? And he was speechless. Then said the king to the servants, Bind him hand and foot, and take him away, and cast him into utter darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth, for many are called, but few are chosen.
Fun.
Whoa.
You weren't snide enough on the friend.
She's
How
just
did
not.
you get it?
Kathy gave me
Friend.
Oh,
I've been practicing.
That's quite out of character for Kathy.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now
Not for me.
You could have done it really well, Bill, because when you were King Herod, I still
Oh.
picture you coming down the aisle, and I'm still quaking in my boots.
You were good.
Pretty terrifying, Herod.
You were
All right.
good. Yeah.
So let's go around initial thoughts. Whoever starts, then we'll just go in a circle.
This is the inauguration if Trump loses. Burn down the Democratic cities. That's what I thought when I read it this morning. That was my first thought.
Really? Okay.
Wow.
So you went immediately to political. Okay.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, can we look at the original context before we start with the contemporary
Well, no,
application?
everybody gets a say here. So, all right. So, Bill, we know where your head is at right now.
Well, two things occurred to me. I mean, we have the other passage where, you know, the end comes like a thief in the night. You don't know when it's coming, and you need to be prepared. This seems to me about preparedness and proper frame of mind. I mean, I think we get a little stuck on wedding robe, you know, and appearance. That's because we're Episcopalians. But so I have two thoughts. One is I regularly think of this passage because unfortunately our house is right in the middle of the village next to the post office across from the community center. People come to it all the time thinking I can solve this or that problem, and they come and bang on the door when I'm on the toilet. And I have now learned to have a state of dress that I can somehow quickly get to the door because the dogs are going crazy. But I'm now, after 10 years, prepared to deal with this kind of insistence.
More information than I wanted to know.
I know, but the other thing that occurred to me, because I think it's about preparedness, not necessarily, you know, I know we got stuck up on the robe part, but the robe part does come into mind with another. We went to a wedding in Mexico City. It was a Dutchman marrying a Mexican woman. We were friends with both of them. And we went to meet one of our Dutch friends in the lobby of her hotel before we went over, and she had on a peasant blouse and a vest, and then jeans and boots. And Ivan looked at her and said, "Are you changing for the wedding?" Because in Catholic Mexican culture, a wedding is a very significant event for which you dress up. And she was furious at him. She said, "I am dressed for the wedding." And he said, "No, you're not." He couldn't control his heritage was coming right out. And she said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Everyone there is going to be, the men are all going to be in dark suits and the women are going to be dressed to the nines." He said, "But you're Dutch, so you can probably get away with this." And so she went that way. And afterwards he said, "Damn it, you were right." I mean, she felt underdressed the whole time. So to me, this is more about looking ahead, thinking about what's going to happen and preparing yourself for it, whether it's someone coming and knocking on the door when you're otherwise engaged, or a wedding of someone very different from you, you know? I mean, in this case, Gabby, the bride, was it was in a Jesuit church. I mean, they knelt before the priest up in the altar. I mean, it was the classic Roman Catholic service. And here she was in jeans. I mean, the peasant vest was okay, but the jeans to a Mexican.
It's interesting that the wedding party or the wedding guests would take on the role of judging this other invitee,
As opposed to the king.
Yeah. So there's a thing about.
Although I've
taking a
never
judgment.
asked Gabby or Rob what they thought. So not something I would do.
Probably better left.
Better left aside, because we love Helen. Helen's
Well, it was a
wonderful.
moot point by then anyway.
Yeah.
You know, it's over.
All right, Barbara.
Well, yesterday I had a doctor's appointment at 9:30 and they called to confirm it and they said, "Please arrive by 9:15." And I got there at 9 o'clock and they said, "Your appointment's not till 10." Even though they had just confirmed it an hour ago. So because of COVID, you have to sit in your car in the parking lot till the MA comes out to get you.
Right.
So I had a whole hour of nothing to do, and thankfully my Bible and the lesson sheet was
Well,
in the car.
prepared. You were prepared.
So I've thought about it a lot, although that doesn't mean that I've come up with anything intelligent to say about it.
That fell out of your Bible.
It's not mine,
Oh,
but
Somehow.
I think it fell out of yours.
no, it just fluttered.
I saw it.
Well, then it flew upward from Bill's grasp, but I had nothing to do with it.
Okay. Anyhow.
So, so you have to kind of visualize this in the original context, and then all these people get invited to this wedding. but essentially their response is, wedding, nah, I think I'd rather stay home and watch TV. But they don't know how splendid this is, you know, so you might even try and persuade them that way. This is the most glorious event you can imagine. Nobody would want to miss out on this. And they say, well, I don't have anything to wear. No worries. The king is going to provide whatever you need. All you have to do is show up at the gate. You'll be issued a tuxedo in your size or a ball gown. No worries. And this one jerk comes in jeans and a sweatshirt. So I think it is, the garment thing is the key significant thing, at least to me.
Interesting.
It's not enough just to be invited. It's not enough to show up. You have to have the garment. And if you don't have the garment, you're going to get the appropriate thing to wear. But who issues it? You don't have to provide your own ball gown and tuxedo. The king is even going to give you what you need to
Except
wear.
this guy didn't have it. So how come the king didn't give him mercy and give him a robe?
Well, how do we know that he wasn't offered it? Maybe he was just defiantly saying, I'm wearing my jeans and sweatshirt, and that's it.
So your thing is that maybe there was some defiance in there,
Well, we don't know.
As
We have to
opposed
go
to
with just the text that we're
unpreparedness.
given.
which is like, if, you know, whether you consider the fall to be a rebellion or the fall to be a stumble, more like Orthodox theology, and saying that, you know, it was an overreach, we were immature and we weren't ready. So
I would just call it a rejection.
So
Yeah,
this
because you
guy's
do
just
have to
plain old
wonder,
reject-
how did all the other people who were scraped off the street have the garment?
That's what I'm saying.
And
He's
he
like,
didn't. I mean, just one.
It doesn't say in here that he gave, the
I
king
know.
or anything gave him anything.
But it is weird because they say they just go out into the street and
Yeah, and
invite
they-
everyone, and
bring him in off the highways.
and
That was
and
a
then
great
none of
image.
them. I mean, they're coming off the street. They're street people.
Yeah.
But
Some of them.
elsewhere, the king does. Maybe it's if this
Because
is
it's
also
not
in
in
Luke, it
here.
might be in Luke.
Yeah, but I mean, I just want to stick to Matthew because this is so rich right now. You know, I just like, I don't know.
I know. I'm just saying that there are other places where the king
I don't-
does state.
I
that the
actually
king
don't
provides.
think this is it? I don't think this
Let
is
me
in
look.
another
I'll look.
one.
You keep going. Other people.
Okay.
Luke
So-
14.
Luke 14. Thank you.
So anyway, for me, as Kathy was reading it, first of all, I had a great image of being out like on 95.
Yeah. The highways.
And you know how like on some smaller side streets, occasionally the firemen will be out there in the middle of the lanes with the boots,
Yes,
and they're
yes.
collecting donations or
Right.
something.
Right.
So I pictured these like, you know, not roadblocks, but like toll booths kind of a thing. And everybody's going through and they're stopping them and they're giving them a free ticket,
Kind
you
of.
know? Go
Yeah.
take exit, you know, whatever, and go to this. And so that was an image I had, was just like this real, just a stream of people coming. And then, but then I pictured this as this is very apocalyptic to me. This is a very end times kind of a thing. And I immediately thought about Revelation too, and the robes. And so my brain went to everybody is invited to eternal salvation. Everybody. This is the big wedding feast, the great eternal wedding feast. And the good, the bad, and everybody is invited. I think Barbara maybe struck a chord with the whole defiance thing. Like, so if everybody has the opportunity for this, but then there's outright rejection, or maybe even more than rejection. Maybe this is like evil trying to get into the kingdom or something. I don't know.
Well, there's active and there's passive rejection.
Yeah, so this
Because
is
the first set of people actively resist,
think-
and
yeah.
the king, I mean, the hardest part, my mother would say, is the king was enraged. He sent his troops, destroyed those murderers, and burned their
I
city.
know.
That's not fair. I can't come to your wedding. Oh, boom, you're dead. I mean, give me a break. So the king is obviously not God. Okay, I mean, that's in all these parables again and again. When it's the king,
not?
we shouldn't equate the king with God, because the
Why?
king behaves very badly in
Well,
parable
God-
after parable.
God did Sodom and Gomorrah and the whole other
There's
places.
there are many texts of terror in the Bible, I'm afraid.
Oh, I know, especially in the Old Testament, and I agree. But in the parables, I think it's a very, very dangerous to equate the king with God. I think the parable is a story that illustrates something, but when we automatically say the king and what he does is God's way of being, then this isn't a God I like.
But the
God-
kingdom of
If a God says that because you prepared your dinner, your oxen and your fat cows have been slaughtered, but they made light of it, and then he kills them?
Yeah, but Tom,
The Pharisees.
the kingdom of heaven is like a king, prepared a wedding banquet for his son. It is quite easy to go there. That the king is God, Jesus is the son, and we know in other vineyard passages that they've talked about how the son was seized and the servants were,
But that's why I like the New Revised Standard Translation better,
Yeah.
the one we're going to read on Sunday. The kingdom of heaven may be compared to, not like. Okay, may be compared to this
Compared to.
situation. Okay,
All right, so I
that's
could
this
see the
translation.
difference between comparing and like. All right.
May be compared to a king who gave a wedding banquet. It's not the kingdom of heaven is a king.
Yeah.
It's a kingdom of heaven may be compared to this situation where a king gives a wedding banquet and all this stuff happens.
Yeah.
Okay, and I think it's just as important, to Barbara's point, to look at the people who actively resist and say, ha ha ha, I'm not coming, and the people who passively resist, they come, but actually they're not prepared, they're not ready for, they're not inclined to celebrate.
But they're the ones who are given some extra care to help them get there. But if you're actively resisting the kingdom of heaven, then that's your prerogative, and the response is God's going to hit the ejection seat out of
Well, except that I don't know how prepared. I mean, the ones who were swept in off the street,
That's a
they
wonderful
went and
visual,
gathered
just
all
what
they
it is.
found, both good and bad.
Yeah.
So you don't have much choice when you're gathered up off the street. The slaves of the king go out and get you, right? And some both good and bad.
Right.
And so we already know some bad are in with the people being invited, which is great.
Yeah.
They may be saved, but at least one of them isn't in the mood.
Yeah.
Isn't this a metaphor for the righteousness of Christ? He clothes us with his righteousness.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I
and-
could go there. Yeah.
Yeah, I
All
like
right.
that.
What do you think, Lori?
Oh, God. I still say that God is kind of, you could like him to the king. And because the Pharisees are the ones that refuse to go, they refuse to accept the wedding. They refuse to accept his son. And then, he went to the common people, and he did zap a lot of, God did zap a lot of people. He really did. I mean,
No, you're right. I mean,
he, he gets angry and everything else, and he's, anyway. And if you read the stuff, the parable before this one, I mean, he's killing people. Okay. So then you've got the people. I mean, Jesus went to everybody, good and the bad. And I really don't understand why the poor guy that wasn't dressed right, it still doesn't. I mean, granted, he was not prepared. He did not offer, he not the same customs. He did not participate in in what he should have.
see, for me, when the word friend is a key, because every time I've read theological commentary, and it makes sense to me, when the divine is addressing somebody as friend, it's usually because that person is in deep trouble. Okay, that's like when I get called by my all three names or something, which hasn't happened in a really long time, because I'm an adult now.
Your mother can still do it.
But I know I tend to think, but when you were talking about Jesus and going out, see, this is interesting. Jesus is not in this passage like at all. I mean, the son is just mentioned. Oh, it's like this is the king is doing everything here, which I think there's something there too.
Okay.
This is the king's action. And Jesus has said multiple times, it's not me, it's my father. I only do my father, you know.
My father's been.
I mean, it's
Right.
always about, Jesus always points to God. So, and then Matthew, because he was very, you know, a scribe and really trying to speak to tradition, maybe Matthew's trying to make a point that would resonate with the Jewish listeners, because this is still really more to the house of Israel, not to the Gentiles. We haven't gotten to the point yet where Matthew has this change, you know, like all of a sudden the mission has expanded to all the world. I don't think we're quite there yet. I know.
I want to know. I mean, here he kills the cat, the oxen and the fatling,
Right.
and still has time before the food rots to go send an army and slaughter the city.
That's a good point.
He has a lot of resources.
I mean, yeah,
Terrible.
you would think this would have had to have happened like within hours. Like, you're not going to have food rot. So this has to be maybe somebody sent out the people, I don't know, just before the wedding or something. So I don't think, I have a feeling not too many people would have been affected.
So back to
It's a
Tom's
story.
point of
Hey, it is a
preparedness, 'cause
story, people.
You don't know the hour.
Yeah, have we turned into fundamentalists?
Well, I am looking at the NIV. so-
Yes, I understand, but you know, if we're going to be literal about it,
Yeah, but
how can he serve that meat that's been rotting for days while he was destroying the
Tom's
city?
Little inconsistencies
right,
drive me crazy.
the parable is you know, is more alluding to things, but it's not like we can't take it literally.
It's more like a dream, isn't it? I mean, it's kind of
Yeah,
like a
dreams never
vision,
make
an
sense.
inspirational thing. I hate to
Didn't
say
wedding
it.
feasts last for days and days?
Yeah,
Yeah.
wedding feasts can last for days and
Moving
days. You're right.
feast.
Yeah, you're right.
Keep bringing
Especially a
them in.
royal one.
Keep killing more.
Kathy,
Cattle
did you
and-
have more to add to your thought there?
Well, there's always going to be one person, I suppose, that's not going to go along with the party. I mean, it's just the way it like
Ah,
this, you
yeah.
know?
I have been to weddings in Maine. The first wedding I went to in Maine, this guy came up with cut-off shorts, t-shirt, and flip-flops, and I'm going,
Yeah, I officiated at a wedding in Vermont, and okay, so granted it was at an alpaca farm on Lake Champlain, and so there was a variety of dress and attire, but the halter tops and short shorts was a bit much for me.
Wow. There wouldn't be a story if you didn't have one person, I don't know, be fighting traditions or,
Yeah, you always have to have a
Yeah,
nemesis in a good movie
I
plot,
guess-
right?
yeah, that's what I'm feeling like. Okay, there had to be one. And here you go. Here's this guy saying,
This poor sucker was it.
I'm not gonna, as we're all talking about different gatherings, you know, there's gonna be someone who's not gonna take the garment, they're not gonna abide by the rituals and traditions of the community, and they're not ready yet, maybe. Well, that's what we're talking about. is
But then it raises the
preparedness.
question of free will. So if there's no choice in the matter and you don't agree to go along with what the king is mandating, then your only option is weeping and gnashing of teeth,
I know, that's the scary
or cities getting burned down. I don't know. That's a little okay. Sandy, what about you?
I guess I kind of went on the idea that when you talk about wedding feast, of course, for me, food comes into it. And I was comparing that, my first thought was comparing that to the communion table. And everyone is invited to the communion table, but not everyone comes.
Right.
And on the other hand, some people go because, oh, I have to go to make the proper show,
Mhm.
but they're not of the right spirit or the right heart. And they're there as, well, maybe one of them, you know, just for the show of it, or
Yeah.
imposters. And of course, then you have the ones that are going to the altar for the communion with the right thought. And I mean, I do know people who, one example always stands out is, oh, I can't go to that church because my so and so relative is there, and well, he's going to keep attendance. Well, he could care less. I mean, yes, he was an Episcopal minister, but he could care less. I mean, if you don't want to be there, don't be there. He didn't like it, but that he'd rather see that, I think, than.
Yeah.
So I mean, you have that was my take on it, of this the whole rejection, and then of course the people that refuse. Well, guess what? You're off, and you know where you're going to end up.
Intention of the heart, what's your reason for being there? Okay, you might have gotten swept up with the crowd, and
Right. So
you
just,
have the opportunity, but I guess you still have the option of rejecting,
Mhm.
being defiant, and
Right. well, those that are defiant, you know where they're going.
and then you have to suffer the consequences of your
Right.
defiance.
Right, they're going to burn. That's the town that's burning. They're going to be off to hell.
But then does that, I don't know, it's like, but then, so that raises for me the problem of free will. Interestingly, there was the former bishop, retired now, of Nevada, wrote this great book called God of Our Silent Tears, which Bishop Lane had given to us a few years back when he was our bishop here. And I was so intrigued by a few of these thoughts that I wrote the Bishop of Nevada. And he and I ended up having this text conversation about free will. It was pretty interesting.
I think, Bill, I don't think it's wrong to look at the Luke passage. Let me
Can you
just say
speak
that.
up a little?
I don't think it's wrong to look at the Luke passage. I like it in Bibles when you
Yeah, oh,
have them
yeah.
alongside each other. And
I
one
love
of the things is that the immediate sequel to this in Luke is, if anyone who doesn't hate their mother, father, sister, brother, son, daughter can't enter the kingdom of heaven.
Right, which is about allegiance, because God doesn't really want us to hate our
No,
family.
and so how come we can accept that right away, but we can't accept the idea that someone who's not wearing the right robe might be a problem? To me, these are more exactly what Sandy said. It's more about your passion, your commitment. Because really Jesus saying no one who doesn't hate their father, mother, brother, sister can't enter the kingdom of
Right.
heaven unless Jesus is all about hate, right?
Right.
And we know Jesus is not about hate. So he's really talking about something else, which is the commitment of the heart.
Right.
And I think that the outward and visible sign of the commitment of the heart here is not wearing a respectful garment. I mean, I hate to say that, but anyway, sorry.
Well, back to the garment of Christ, really, which is the intention of Christ, the heart of Christ, the mind of Christ, the prayers of Christ, as opposed to, whatever you want, but maybe what Christ wants.
Well, I like what Sandy said too about correlating it with the Eucharist, but in the Eucharist, we, along with angels and archangels, are receiving a small taste of the wedding feast to come. It's the
Right.
marriage supper of the Lamb.
Right.
The church is the bride and Jesus is the bridegroom. And that analogy, metaphorical language is all through scripture. So I think we have to go, or we can't, it's hard for us to help from seeing this into the future. It's, like in that day when we're at the real deal, we're obviously we're going to have the right garments on and we're not going to be worried about that. But the fact that at the end, the outer darkness, the weeping and gnashing of teeth and all that has to be correlated with eternal separation.
Mm-hmm.
So the opposite of that has to be this glorious wedding banquet in the sky, or however you want to think of it.
Right, because weeping, this is a great topic. There was a whole semester just on heaven, hell, and last things at seminary. And when you think about notions of what hell is or eternal damnation, the worst thing for our understanding as Christians is to be separated from God. which,
Because nothing can separate us from the love of God, according to Paul.
right.
And then to be separated would just be awful.
So it would be, when I think I'm kind of getting goosebumps right now thinking about this, to make a defiant choice and then have to live with the consequences of that choice. And you get a lot of chances if you're not wearing the right robe or whatever, I mean, we have a lot of faults. We're bad, that's what I mean by bad. But we make a lot of mistakes, and God is, in this parable, the king is willing to work with us on that. But I think if you make a choice like absolutely no, then maybe sooner or later you're going to regret that choice.
I think the Calvinists would have a field day with this passage.
Yeah. What's interesting is I was thinking also about, so I was talking about how Matthew's change of scope, that Jesus initially is sent just to the house of Israel earlier on, probably like 10 or so passages ago. And then now it's like, okay, there seems to be this opening up here, like not just trying to be more broadly invitational to the wedding feast. So I think this is clear evidence of that opening up of this understanding of what the scope is, and trying to help others to see that the scope is completely expansive.
Probably everyone here's had this experience. I had a very, very close friend who became addicted to drugs and died. And one of my vivid memories is of him going out from a restaurant where we were meeting as a group and trying to talk him to come in, because he was sobbing uncontrollably in the car and he was pretty messed up. And he refused to come in. And he died a few, not so much longer. I mean, it got worse. And what afflicted me tremendously for the first few years after his death was this notion of his real separation from the love of God. I kept praying over and over again to God that somehow he would heal that, because he died that way. He was born an evangelical Lutheran from Norway. And we used to have these arguments in college because his parents somehow had taught him there was no grace and forgiveness. So he believed you only accumulated sins as you went through life. You got worse and worse.
Couldn't have been a Lutheran.
They were very odd, I have to say. They left Norway because they didn't want to worship with the established church. So somehow they had gone down some twisted path. But it was really horrible for me to have a friend who completely rejected the notion of forgiveness or grace, right? And have it so ruin his life that in the end, he felt completely separated from his friends, from God, from anything, and died that way. And yet, I know other people who've gotten into drug addiction, and that's where they've been at times. So I don't know where that is in this, but I just had to say that talking about the separation, I think, we can sometimes have a too old-fashioned or narrow sense of what hell is.
Yeah, that would be a great topic. Just if we wanted to take a break from the Sunday lectionary, if like say the week when we have the diocesan thing, we could have a study about hell or something.
Do we have to?
Well,
You're gonna scare me.
it is interesting because there's so many different interpretations on hell and what it means to people. For some, it is just like a separation of the heart kind of a thing, and for others, it's here on earth. What the pain and suffering that people are. Some people say hell is here.
Mm-hmm.
And others like, no, heaven's here. And I was like, well, heaven and hell, hello, they're not like, they're together. So
I have come up with a new picture based on all this talk about garments. My first year teaching, Ocean Hill, Brownsville, biggest all-black middle school in the city, my homeroom of 30 kids all black. Joyce wanted to have a party for them.
Okay.
We were living in a fourth floor walk-up tenement, East 92nd Street, uh, Brooklyn. So we planned a party for Halloween on a Saturday. I sent permission slips home. 15 kids brought back their permission slips.
Yeah.
I went to pick them up in our Volkswagen microbus in
Yeah.
Brooklyn, drive back into the city to our apartment for the party. When I picked them up, they were all in their little Sunday suits and ties, girls in party dresses. These are
Really?
kids in the slum dressed up to respect Joyce and me.
Mhm.
We drove into the city, turned onto my block, and they looked at the tenement buildings and they said, "Mr. Nave, you live in a slum." But the apartment, very beautifully put together as Joyce does.
Yeah.
We had, Joyce had made a little castle cake with scoops of ice cream. We used the fine china teacups to serve them their hot chocolate. You'd think they had been trained from growing up to be nice, refined. So their respect for this party, for
Yeah.
the king,
Mm-hmm.
parabolically speaking. So maybe the folks who were invited, it was a multi-day feast, had time to go home
Mhm.
and get their good garments. And that one was, no way, I'm not gonna. So interesting picture.
Yeah. And maybe like it's not so much punishment as it is like you don't know what you're missing out on. And when you figure that out,
Mhm.
it's like you know, uh the parable of Lazarus and Dives. And Lazarus dies because he's, been extremely ill and covered with sores and etc. And, he dies and he goes to the bosom of Abraham. And Dives dies, and that's the name that tradition has given him. And he dies, and there's this great chasm that separates them. And so Dives is begging Lazarus, go say a good word for me so that I can at least, and Lazarus said, Abraham says, no, there's this great chasm. We can't cross it. He said, well, at least go warn my brothers so they won't suffer the same fate as I have. And he says, if they haven't listened to the prophets and everything, there's like you've lost your chances. So I think it's back to kind of what you said about preparedness. Like we have chance after chance after chance to get it right, or at least attempt to get it right. And then, but at some point, the door closes.
I think the other parable, though, that I'm reminded of the two sons of the father who asks him to go to work.
Yeah.
And the first one says, I'm going to go, but doesn't.
Right.
Right.
Okay, I'm going to come to this wedding feast, but I ain't really
But
here.
his intention is.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm not here to celebrate. You just, I'm coming. But whereas the one who didn't go but actually went and did the work,
Yeah, said he
Right.
wasn't
yeah,
coming.
then in his heart he was doing what he was supposed to do. So to me, we just heard that
We
last
did.
week or the
Yeah,
week before.
yeah.
So, but the first part really resonates with me. The son who said, "Yeah, I'll go," but didn't. That's like the person who goes to the wedding feast but isn't really there.
Yeah.
I mean, not in his head, not in his spirit, not with how he's come.
I think it would be really great to hear the Luke passage because I do love to have them talk to each other and to see. Now, Luke is generally assumed that was a little bit later. Now scholars are debating that actually.
And he skips the clothing part.
Which
And he
one is that?
also, so we're looking at Luke 14, 15 through 23.
Right.
Yeah. So, does anybody else have the NIV? Because if not, I'll read the NIV because it's a little bit. So the NIV tends to be a bit more evangelical than, like, say, if there's a choice in wording, it will use a more evangelical phrase rather than the NRSV, which will be, when there's a little variation, not so. Some might say agenda, but so are we ready? 14.
Mhm.
When one of those at the table with him heard this, he said to Jesus, "Blessed is the man who will eat at the feast in the kingdom of God." Jesus replied, "A certain man was preparing a great banquet." So here we have a man, not a king, preparing a great banquet and invited many guests. At the time of the banquet, he sent his servant to tell those who had been invited, "Come, for everything is now ready." But they all alike began to make excuses. The first said, "I've just bought a field and I must go and see it. Please excuse me." Oh, he did say politely, please. Another said, "I have just bought 5 yoke of oxen and I'm on my way to try them out. Please excuse me." Interesting, they're both about buying things.
Right.
Still another said, "I just got married, so I can't come." Well, you can kind of understand. Jeez. The servant came back and reported this to his master. Then the owner of the house became angry and ordered his servant, "Go out quickly into the streets and alleys of the town and bring in the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame." "Sir," the servant said, "what you ordered has been done, but there is still room." I'm thinking about another passage in my head right now. Then the master told his servant, "Go out into the roads and country lanes and make them come in, so that my house will be full. I tell you, not one of those men who were invited will get a taste of my banquet."
You know what's really interesting in the notes here is it says when earlier in the parable he uses the word you, it's the singular, but at the end, that last verse, the you is plural. So it implies that he's turned and looking at his audience and
Right.
saying, "For I tell you,
Bigger, yeah.
yeah, all of you,"
Oh.
not the singular yous that were used before, "Sir, what you ordered," so forth and so on. Those were all singular. So
Yeah.
Right.
even though we use the same word for both
Right.
singular and plural.
What also jumped into my mind, and we'll go around the circle again, is that remember the passage where they were in the marketplace and the owner kept going out again and again and again?
To hire
Yes.
laborers.
Terrible business practice. And then paying them all the same.
Yes.
And there was, but it was like he just wanted his workplace to be full, to not have any vacancies.
That's the sense I got.
Yeah.
It's more about him wanting to fill this space. I mean, does he really care about the
king-
people that he's invited to this space? He just wants it full. So it sounds like it's about him.
Well, I think it's about it. I read the desire in here. This man, certain man, is just so desirous to just want to share maybe the abundance or to.
Maybe.
So you're thinking
But
this is
just
like a
one-
selfish thing, but
Well,
yeah.
it's kind of felt a little bit that way
Okay.
when he was looking out of the room and it wasn't full enough. He wanted more.
Yeah.
It's like, well, wait a minute here. Which are you? Are you being, you wanting to share your abundance, or is this just all about you wanting to fill the space so it looks good to everybody else that's in the space?
Well, so what's the intention of filling the room? That's the question.
My question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's in
Okay,
it.
so let's go in reverse order here. So, Barbara,
Oh, was that right?
what?
Yeah, good.
I don't know, something just loomed out at me that I didn't even notice before, and it's early in the passage. He sent his slaves to call those who had been invited.
Yeah.
So the invitations have already gone out to specific
Select
people. I didn't notice that before
Yes,
for some
select
reason.
people. I heard
That's
that
why you
too.
could say it was addressed to, the house of Israel.
Yeah, just a select group of people. And the other thing that that I keep thinking about for some reason, and some of you've probably heard me say that before, that, before COVID, I always used to think it would be the marginalized people that would really enjoy church if we could just invite them and get them to come, like the homeless or the abused survivors of domestic abuse and that sort of thing. They're the ones that would really embrace this. They might be afraid to come at first, but if we could get them there and explain things to them, they'd say, oh, this is pretty cool. I like this.
Oh,
Oh, I was thinking you should go that way. Well, hearing this version without the killing and burning
Yeah.
in the first part, all the people who don't come, who don't respond to the invitation, and without the part about rejecting the person without the right robe, made me go back and look at a note on the Matthew, which says that many scholars believe these are two parables put together. That the first part was before the thing about the guy with the robe. The guy with the robe is one of the preparedness parables and should be with them. So that Matthew has conflated two different things, and Luke has the original singular parable. It's just a thought, just fun.
he certainly left out a lot of the things that kind of don't really make sense.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it seems to make more sense. Bill, what do you think?
I don't have anything new to add,
Okay.
so I'll pass.
Okay. Sandy?
It just seems like maybe they were writing the parable to fit in with the way people were living their lives at that point, where when Luke comes along, it just seems like it's more of what I can understand better, and it just seems to make more sense to me. Where Matthew's just all brimfire.
Which is much more Hebrew scriptures.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do think I do think Matthew was targeting a different audience than Luke is, for
Yeah.
sure.
I think you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
I guess I don't have. I'll pass.
I don't have anything new either.
You don't have anything new. All right. So, I guess that's a good point to wrap things up a little bit. It's 9:57. So we have a few more minutes, 3 more minutes. So, raise of hands. Who? We already know that you felt like Luke was, and you too, Kathy, was easier to understand.
Yeah.
So, who thinks Luke speaks more to the contemporary experience that we have now, and might be easier for folks in general to understand? All right.
I would almost read the Matthew in the King James Version, because to me it's an older way of imagining consequences.
Yeah.
They're very extreme consequences.
Right. Yeah.
You decline an invitation, so you're killed. You don't wear the right gown, so you're killed.
No
No,
middle
you're thrown out. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is
But
no middle
to
ground,
me,
that's right.
it's just a real
Black and white.
black and white,
Yeah.
and I respect that in a way. I mean, I struggle with it because there are consequences. There are consequences, but the Luke is a lot easier because it flows better.
Yeah.
I think it still flows into a very difficult passage about unless you hate your mother and father, and
Right.
yeah. So Luke isn't easy either,
Right.
actually.
Well, the
but
word hate in that following passage means allegiance.
right.
And where is your allegiance to? And if it doesn't begin with God, which everything flows from that point, your relations with everybody else, how you see others, it all flows from your understanding of God.
Yeah. I mean, when I was a kid, we couldn't play games on Sunday, right? We could play games every other day of the week, but not Sunday. And we went to church for probably 5 or 6 hours. I mean, you know, that was the way of it. You went at like 8:30 and you got home at 2:30, and
Yep.
it was all very normal. And you were dressed to the nines.
Yep.
I mean, and there would be much weeping and gnashing of teeth if you didn't wear the right clothing and if you played game. Well, first of all, you'd be, even my parents, who were enlightened liberal Episcopalians, would have washed my mouth out with soap or belted me if I played a game on Sunday.
Wow.
So the world has changed. And I think it's hard sometimes to get back into that mindset. But my parents certainly believed there were very dire consequences for not having the right heart. But they also believed that you showed you had the right heart by what you did and what you wore and how you acted. Whereas I often think people have the right heart. It's just their circumstances are such that they can't buy the right clothes, and they
Right.
can't go places because they don't have a car, and they can't they can't accept an invitation that's printed on fine paper because they're scared to go to that event.
Yeah, and you raise a really good point, because I know that like at the crossing, we had quite a motley group that would attend, and it was everything from you know, people in off the streets to people that were, you know, executives leaving very, you know, lucrative jobs. And we used to try to emphasize, I mean, we verbally emphasize to people there, you know, the students who would show up in, you know, comfy clothes and jeans and whatever. Just like, it doesn't matter what you're really wearing on the outside. Everybody's welcome. You just, you know, it's in here what matters. So come, you know, it was come to the wedding feast.
I mean, John Cockcroft would be the only one of our congregation who would get into heaven if we had to be dressed to the nines, right? I mean, he comes always in a nice shirt and tie and
Sports coat.
sports coat,
That's
and
right.
looks like the Episcopal Church of my childhood.
Yes.
There was
Actually, you would get into heaven. I think you dress very nicely.
there was a
And
author.
Brendan, you would get into heaven. Definitely.
It was
The rest of us.
an author that I read, the one that we used, I think it was a year or 2 years ago, Tish Warren something or other, about ordinary things.
Mhm.
And it was like ordinary stuff, like very down to earth, like thinking about God when you're brushing your teeth, or, you know, and she would think about, you know, God waking up and, you know, being still under the covers, and, you know, you can use your imaginations for whatever is under those covers. Her point was, we're all, you know, when it comes down to it, we're skin and bones, and, you know, we're flesh and blood, and we're all, the external is not what counts, but it's the internal.
One of the things that Barbara said, I've been going it over, and you said you wanted the church to reach out to people who had been abused, who had been and had problems, and which sounds like street people. And then you would say the women that had been abused, and I thought, oh my God, if you can go into any church, any building, and you cannot pick out the women that have been abused, because they wear masks, they wear cloaks, their clothes are proper.
1 in 4 of
But
people
they
in
have been
women in
abused
congregations have been abused.
so badly.
Right.
And you hear stories and you pray, God, that they've gotten out. But economics has nothing to do with it.
Mhm.
With addiction, with abuse, with
Addiction, yeah, for sure.
some of the cruelties that humans can express and other humans are amazing, and it has nothing to do with economics. So
Yeah.
we have a lot of women that have been abused,
Yeah,
Mhm.
and they are coming.
Mhm.
excellent.
So anyway,
Good point. So I think that's a good wrap up phase for us.
Thank you all, because that's a really tough gospel.
Yeah,
Hard to enjoy that gospel,
yeah.
but you all made it enjoyable.
I
Thank
still
you.
take Matthew over Luke and all his details. Luke and all his details. Get to the point.
Oh
I'm a
no, I
big
love the
picture kind
Christmas
person.
part of
I don't
Luke.
want to
All
all
right.
these details.
So
Oh, Christmas parties.
let us pray. Holy and gracious God, your scriptures challenge us and provoke us. And we ask that you continue to open up our hearts and minds and souls and help us to hear the truth in all of your scriptures, some which are more easier to hear than others, and then help us to live out those truths, which is even harder than hearing your truths. Help us to embrace those who do not have the proper attire. Help us to understand that what matters is in the heart, and help us to be obedient to your will and less defiant in our response to you and your word. Bless each one here. Sustain, encourage, guide with your Holy Spirit, all of us, until we gather together again. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I just want to say quickly that this whole COVID thing and the car services has changed my whole thinking about what's important regarding church. And like Sunday, I was leaning back on my headrest thing in my car listening to the sermon. And I thought, oh, this is so comfortable. And like at church, when we have to stand, I always grab the pew and kind of pull myself up. Oh, I don't have to do any of that in my car. And I don't like this or I don't like that, but I can say Lutheran words. I can say the body of Christ given for you. I don't have to say the bread of heaven because I'm in my car and I can do whatever I want. And then I was thinking a couple of weeks ago, it's how, and I used to be kind of high church. The fancier, the better, like I'm with Tom's parents, it's the people that are so important. And one Sunday I didn't talk to anybody, not because I didn't want to, but you know how it is, you have to stay in your car and everything. Just seeing everybody without even talking to them, just seeing everybody out my car window was enough. And it's just taught me that my former way of thinking about church has totally been revised. I hope for the better.
Wow.
All of us.
That's
Wow.
amazing.
You're
Yeah,
not
that's
alone.
great
All of us.
sharing. Thank you.
Yeah, we've all been affected by
Wow.
what you just said. Yeah. Same.
However, I do expect you to preach with your mask on or one of those plexiglass shields
I
when we
got one.
return to the meeting house.
I actually got
Oh,
one.
yes, if we're inside.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I got one. I picked it up at the soup kitchen. Mask, for plexiglass.
Oh, did
Shield.
you?
Oh,
Those yeah. They it's not enough to just have those plexi shields though. They say
gotta
you have
wear
to
a
have the
mask.
shield and the mask.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
that's right. 'Cause
well,
the germs
thank you,
go
everybody.
underneath and on
Especially